I found a trip that took me to a place I think is called San Marinda. Richard Gere has been married 3 times and dated some of the biggest names in Hollywood. But in 2024, when he was 75 years old, he finally told the truth. Everything changed because of one woman. She wasn't the beauty he married in Vegas with tinfoil rings. She wasn't the woman he sued for more than $120 million. She wasn't even American. He sold his huge house and left the country he had lived in for decades for her. The statement came out of the blue and in a quiet way. When he said her name, it made sense of all the strange choices he'd made since he turned 70. Richard Tiffany Gere was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on August 31, 1949. Homer George Gere and Doris and Tiffany raised 5 kids, and he was the second one. A lot of people don't know this, but Richard's family tree goes all the way back to several Mayflower passengers. Some of their names were Daguerre Priest, Francis Cook, John Billington, Richard Warren, and William Brewster. He was one of only a few Hollywood stars whose family tree went back to the first people who came to America. But in fact, he was raised in a more strict than royal way. Homer, his father, wanted to be a preacher when he was younger. He studied hard with that goal in mind, but he quit the ministry in the end and went in a different direction. He worked as an accountant for a while and then as an insurance salesman. That change from spiritual dreams to business realities made the house feel empty. Fought in the Pacific during World War II on the USS Aristeus. He used the GI Bill to get his degree from the Wharton School, which is one of the best business schools in the country, after he got back from the war. He first worked for Atlantic Refining Company. After that he worked at Nationwide Insurance for most of his time and became one of the best agents there. Their family had strong Methodist beliefs, but as Richard grew up there, he started to ask questions that no one could answer. The family moved to Syracuse, New York, when Richard was 11 years old. Things began to change when he started going to North Syracuse Central High School. He was not like any other kid. In gymnastics, he was getting trophies. Writing original music for the school plays and putting on plays. He knew how to play the piano, the drums, and the horn. Math class was hard for most of the kids. While studying to be a professional gymnast, Richard wrote whole musical arrangements. He won so many state-level gymnastics events that the University of Massachusetts Amherst gave him a full gymnastics scholarship. He also had a guitar with him that he bought when he was 17. A guitar that he would still have many years from now. The guitar turned into more than just a tool. It became a part of how he thought about himself. But even though he was very talented, things were getting worse between him and his father. Numbers, routine, and security ruled Homer's world. Richard was looking for answers, freedom, and purpose. That stress pulled him away from her in a quiet way. Richard began to read books about Eastern thought behind people's backs. He quietly checked them out from libraries, being careful not to tell his parents that he was a Methodist. But he read a lot of books about meditation and Tibetan Buddhism in the quiet of his own room. He read Being and Nothingness by Sartre but didn't fully understand it. But those pages made him feel something. He began to think about whether he could live a free life with a greater meaning after reading Evans Wendt's translations of Tibetan thought. It wasn't about revolt in the usual sense. He wasn't getting angry. He was digging deep inside without making any noise. By the time he finished in 1967, he had already moved on from the world of his family. He had a full athletic grant, but Richard turned it down, which shocked his family. He only stayed at UMass for 2 years before leaving. He didn't want high school or Olympic titles. It was something else he wanted. He still couldn't explain it. In college, he took part in anti-war protests because that was the thing to do in the late 1960s. His father was shocked when he dropped out of school in 1969. Homer had spent his whole life making things safe, but now his son was giving it all up for fear of the unknown. But Richard wasn't interested in the usual ways of being successful. He wanted to write stories and put them on stage to understand life better. At age 20, he took a huge risk when he went to Seattle. With no official training in acting. It worked out for him to get a part at the Seattle Repertory Theater during the 1969-70 season. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead was his first real role. Because of that job, he worked with pros and watched, learned, and took in everything. Around this time, he also did shows at the Provincetown Playhouse on Cape Cod. These jobs didn't pay much, and he barely had enough money for food. But he was beginning to feel like he knew who he was. The worst years were in the early 1970s. Being a drifter, he went from place to place and played music on the streets to make money. Afterward, he said that eggs were his main food. It wasn't even an option to eat out. He was poor, by himself, and didn't know where his next job would come from. It was the same guitar he bought as a kid that was now helping him make just enough money to stay alive. It wasn't for the looks, it was for life. But those years of hunger changed him. They taught him about people, pain, and how to get through it. That time would later shape his work as a humanitarian and the kindness he brought to it. His big break came in 1971 when he got a part in the Broadway rock opera Soon. It did not do well when it first came out at the Ritz Theater. After only 3 shows, the show was over. He was hurt. He didn't stop, though. In 1973, 2 years later, he got his big break when he played Danny Zuko in the first London version of Grease. It ran for a few months, and for the first time, he had a regular income and was respected in his field. It was more than just a job, it was a change. People loved him. His voice, stage appearance, and natural charm finally got him a job. He was able to save money, feel better about himself, and make plans to come back to America after his time in London. He took a lot of acting classes after moving back to New York in 1972, some of which were based on Sanford Meisner's methods. Because he used to do gymnastics, he learned how to show how he felt through movement in silence. A lot of the time, he did off-Broadway shows for little or no pay. His meals were simple, but he gave everything he had. He went from being a hopeful dropout to a serious, down-to-earth character during these years. His rise kept going when, as Danny Zuko, he led the London group of Grease for the first time in 1973. Before that, he did 5 different parts as an understudy in New York. One night, one of the stars got sick and couldn't perform, so Richard filled in. He got it right. The directors knew about it. They asked him to be in charge of the show when it went to London. He had never been outside of the country before. Richard's show at the New London Theatre opened to a lot of attention. He was singing Summer Nights on video from that time. At his peak, he was only 24 years old. But people were already saying that he was unique. He joined the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1974 and played Lucentio in The Taming of the Shrew. The part required sword fights, projecting, and a lot of endurance. His background in sports helped him with the hard scenes. By performing in places like Regent's Park, he learned how to combine Shakespearean style with the natural instincts of an American. He stood out because of the mix. Being around British players like Joan Plowright taught him how to show presence and nuance. He was praised in the classical world for that performance, which showed he could do more than just songs. In his early years in theater, he got into some trouble. He was fired in the middle of a run of Grease because he reportedly made up a kiss on stage. The newspapers had a great time. In the 1970s, the British press loved writing about American stars. Mostly those who were brave and good-looking. It wasn't important if they kissed or not. The rumors about him made him seem like a more passionate actor who wasn't afraid to take chances. In 1978, he played a part similar to a monk in a play that was said to be called Eckhart. Not much is known about that play, but it happened at the same time as a real change in his personal life. He went to Nepal and India for the first time that same year. He met lamas and went to Tibetan refugee homes, who would teach him Buddhism for all of his days. His love wasn't a phase, it was deep and would last a lifetime. He learned about inner freedom and kindness for everyone when he studied Zen and then Tibetan Buddhism. Then 1979 came along. Richard played Max, a gay man who was locked up in a Nazi concentration camp, in the Broadway play Bent. People were shocked by the first scene. He acted with a lot of emotion. Frontal numbness in full. In the story, homosexuals were persecuted during the Holocaust, which is still not talked about in popular media. Richard went to Dachau as part of his training because he wanted to understand how painful it was. He won the 1980 Theatre World Award for the performance, which made an impression that will last. As an adult, Anderson Cooper said that seeing the play as a child helped him understand who he was. Richard was brave and sure of himself when he chose to play this part. He wasn't trying to become famous. The stage helped him find the meaning he was looking for. A TV show called Strike Force, which came out in April 1975, was Richard Gere's big break in the movie business. It only showed once and was never turned into a series, but it was important. In a dark crime story, he played a state cop. The story was loosely based on the French Connection drug case. He had never handled a gun before and had to train hard just to look the part. The shoot itself was a mess. A real NYPD officer thought that Gere's co-star Cliff Gorman was a real suspect while they were shooting a chase scene in Penn Station and tried to arrest him in the middle of the scene. At the Fulton Fish Market, people wanted to be paid in cash just to let the crew shoot there. They yelled that they gave the Godfather crew $1,000 and expected the same in return. One person even drove a snowplow right at the group. It was a crash lesson in making both crime dramas and movies set in real life. In 1976, a year later, he had a small part as a Marine raider in Baby Blue Marine, which starred Jan Michael Vincent. The movie took place in 1944 and tried to make it feel like it was in a small American town during World War II. It was filmed near Mount Shasta, and the location work was praised, but people didn't come to see it. When it came out on May 5, it didn't do very well. The failure was so bad that Gere fired his agent because he thought he was only being cast in military roles. The movie cost real money and didn't make it back. And it was the last time John Drew Barrymore was seen on screen before he disappeared into seclusion. Afterward, there was even talk in the business that Gere's performance was so much better than Vincent's that it pretty much ended Vincent's chances of becoming a main man. Then everything changed in 1977. In Looking for Mr. Goodbar, Gere played a rough and scary part. He played Tony, a con artist who was hooked on drugs and falls in love with Diane Keaton's character. His scene work was so serious that it scared his co-stars. Some people said he didn't change much between takes. Roseanne Quinn was killed in real life in 1973, and the movie didn't hold back. Even though it only opened in 110 screens, it made $1.54 million in its first weekend. It went on to make $16.9 million, which is more than $85 million today. For the final scene, flickering strobe lights were used to make it look like the subject was gasping for air. And it became one of the scariest scenes in movies in the 1970s. The movie made him famous, but it also made him look like a scary person. Geena Davis starred in Terrence Malick's 1978 movie Days of Heaven. The shoot was very hard. In real wheat fields in the Canadian sun, they shot near Whiskey Gap, Alberta. The actors worked 12-hour days. The team could only use light for about 25 minutes a day because most of the scenes were shot during magic hour, the short glow right after sunset. Gere got heat stroke while they were shooting. Hollywood techs were annoyed that director Malick wouldn't turn off the prepared lighting. The house wasn't just a facade, it was a real building that was built in the middle of the wheat. Nestor Almedros, the cinematographer, was almost blind and used Polaroid pictures to figure out how bright something was. Still, the movie won an Oscar for Best Picture. In the end, it was worth the high cost. In the same year, Gere left for Nepal with painter Sylvia Martins, even though his movie business wasn't sure what would happen next. He talked to monks, read a book about the Dalai Lama, and went to India to see Dharamshala. His life changed because of the trip. He became a Buddhist and followed the Gelugpa school. It wasn't a publicity stunt. He made a difference and came back stronger. The visit made it clear to him that he needed to go after roles that felt real, which led straight to American Gigolo. When it came out in 1980, American Gigolo wasn't just a movie. A fresh start for my work. Gere was the first big Hollywood actor to show full frontal nudity in a mainstream movie. He did this by standing by a window in a scene that wasn't sexual. That alone made the news. He also made up the famous scene where he works out without a shirt on while listening to Swedish language tapes. The movie made $23 million and only cost $4.8 million to make. Giorgio Armani made the outfit, which started a whole trend in fashion. The director, Paul Schrader, made Gere's character to be the exact opposite of Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. The movie did well. Gere's were finally here. In the same year, he played the lead role in A Lesson from Aloys on Broadway. It was about apartheid in South Africa and caused riots outside the theater. Some people in the crowd said the show was political propaganda, but for Gere, it was the start of his activism in real life. He did more than just do something, he spoke out. The Officer and the Gentleman took his fame to a whole new level in 1982, but the happy finish almost didn't happen. Gere thought the scene in the workplace lift was too sad and wouldn't shoot it. He agreed, but only after hearing the music for Up Where We Belong. He and his co-star Deborah Winger didn't get along behind the scenes. She is said to have called him cocky. Due to the stress, the last scene had to be filmed 10 times, but the end result became famous. The movie made $130 million after it only cost $6 million to make. Then in 1983, Breathless came out. It was meant to be a bold remake of the French classic, but director Jim McBride and Gere got into a fight. The plot changed all the time. McBride pushed for racy naked scenes that weren't in the original plan. Gere said he was going to quit the $13 million movie. Filming stopped for 3 days while lawyers stepped in. The bare bodies were cut down, but the damage was already done. The movie only made $19 million, and McBride never directed another big-budget movie. During the Cotton Club, things got worse. Robert Evans, who produced the movie, was addicted to cocaine and got involved with crooks. Deals for financing got physical. One of the backers, Roy Radin, was killed in a canyon. Evans didn't want to speak, so he could have gone to jail. Coppola took over the lead role. Played a tap dancer with ties to the mob and asked for rewrites. The $47 million movie bombed, but Gere made it through the chaos. Then there was Pretty Woman, which was first offered to Al Pacino, who turned it down even though they liked the plot. It was finally Gere who got the part of Edward Lewis. During a call with the director, Julia Roberts gave him a post-it note that said "Say yes." He almost said no again. Everything changed at that time. He said yes to the $14 million movie, which made $463,400,000 global and $421 million in ticket sales in the US alone. Gere made $12 million and made up the famous opera Kiss on the Spot. In 1990's Internal Affairs, he played a dirty LAPD detective called Dennis Peck, which was a complete change from his normal look. He robbed drug sellers, killed people for money, and lied to everyone. Andy Garcia got really hurt in one scene that was very violent. They were amazed at how well Gere played a very dark character. During this time, a false story began to spread like flames. The well-known hamster story. It didn't make sense. It didn't move. After their fight with the Kings of Flatbush, they thought Stallone started it, but Stallone denied it. It was all over the news, and late-night artists made jokes about it for years. It spread like wildfire and Gere couldn't get rid of it. Summersby was Gere's role in 1993. He learned a Southern accent for 6 months to play a Civil War veteran who might not be who he says he is. There were stories about him in the tabloids. And her co-star Jodie Foster, but both of them denied it. The $30 million movie made $140 million around the world. At Gere's request, the ending was changed after filming. Once more, Primal Fear came out in 1996. Gere played a cunning defense lawyer who slowly figures out that his altar boy client is a murderer who is trying to trick people. He practiced the important rage scene 50 times to get it just right. The movie that cost $14 million made $102 million, and Edward Norton became famous very quickly. In 1999, he worked with Julia Roberts again on Runaway Bride. Making it was a mess. It went from $10 million to $70 million. People who saw the first cut didn't like it, so more scenes were filmed. Some people said it was just a way to make money, but it still made $309 million. But Gere's action caught up with him in the end. He didn't follow the script and said bad things about China's treatment of Tibet at the 1993 Oscars. People didn't forget about it. The Chinese box office became more important to Hollywood, and Gere was quietly pushed out. Officials in China told directors not to work with him. His movie Red Corner, which came out in 1997 and was critical of China's judicial system, lost $30 million. Gere later said yes. He was put on a blacklist. Tensions kept going even in 2000. He had a fight with director Robert Altman over the naked lake scene on the set of Dr. T and the Women. Gere was not feeling well. Miss Farrah Fawcett, though, demanded that the scene be filmed with the whole crew there. The first shot was made up on the spot and took 5 days to make. The smoke-filled sets made Gere's lungs get sick. He pushed himself even more in Unfaithful, where he played a man who was driven to kill. Diane Lane caused her neck to bulge out during a scene where they kiss. Both of the stars got sick from the smoke. Adrian Lyne was a notoriously perfectionist director, and the set of the movie had to be treated with antibiotics all the time. It still did well at the box office. For the ruse, Gere changed into a different person. In order to study Howard Hughes records, he put on 15 pounds and grew a mustache. A big publishing house was fooled by Clifford Irving, who he played, into buying a fake history of Hughes. There were hints in the movie that the fake might have had an effect on Watergate. Everyone lies sometimes, but not always in ways that hurt other people. Richard Gere chose to learn how to tap dance from scratch for a movie when he was 53 years old. He had 3 months to get ready for the movie Chicago. Every day, he locked himself and his teacher in a room by themselves. Outside, people could hear him yelling in anger as he worked to learn the steps. On set, it turned into a game. When someone made a loud noise, someone would say, "Richard's working on his tap." But when it was time to film his big number, Razzle Dazzle, he wouldn't let anyone see him practice. He waited until the lights went out. At the same time, 4 cameras switched between truth and fantasy. It only took 2 hours to finish. He got his first Golden Globe for that role. He did pretty well for someone who hadn't danced since he was a kid. It had been 5 years since he played a stranger. This time, he wasn't just pretending to be Bob Dylan, he was really one of his many faces. In the book I'm Not There. Through the eyes of a strange Western criminal, Gere played an older version of Dylan. His whole voice had to change. He tried really hard to sound like Dylan's growl. His scenes looked like they were taken from a dream. The French New Wave and the rough edges of the West came together. He went through strange settings and spoke lines that were taken straight from Dylan's actual words. The movie used 6 different actors to show how Dylan's character changed over time. It took $20 million to make, but only $11 million was made at the box office. Still, it became a cult classic, and Gere's slow, thoughtful performance made it stand out. For Nights in Rodanthe, 2008, he worked with Diane Lane again. It went from being a sweet romance to something more dangerous. They made the movie during a real subtropical storm. Gere hurt himself in a key scene on the beach. There were real waves. The rocks were very sharp. He almost drowned. 400 actors stood in real rain and wind for the whole pier party scene. Later, a nor'easter blew down that same house on the beach. But Gere wouldn't stop doing his own water tricks on set. His eyes showed the storm. After that, Arbitrage came along in 2012. He played a man who could smile while hiding a $400 million scam when he was 63 years old and became a billionaire. A lot of what he read about Bernie Madoff and people like him, but the director didn't want a copy. Gere made a new type of bad guy. Keep your cool. And risky. He doesn't blink when he talks about illegal loans in one scene. The video never stops. He had to stay in character for the whole take. Some people said it was his best work since Chicago. But even though the movie did well, most people watched it when they wanted to. No matter what, it showed what he could do as someone whose life is falling apart from the inside out. In 2016, he made a big change again, this time in Norman. An independent film with a small budget about a lonely New York handyman. He wasn't Jewish, but he learned Yiddish phrases and walked around Manhattan for months to get a feel for the society. He wore 6 layers of clothes every day while they were shooting to keep warm. Norman does not have a spot to live. He only has one bag for everything. He sleeps somewhere you can't see. I talked to real Upper West Side fixers and watched how they do their jobs. The road was empty. He was just a man trying to make a difference in a place that doesn't care. The show showed that Gere still had humility, which is something most artists lose as they get older. In real life, his life was full of changes and turns. She was 22 years old when they met. He was 39 years old. In 1991, they got married in Las Vegas with tinfoil rings. After the fact, Crawford said she lost herself in the romance. She tried to like the same things he did. Baseball, Buddhism, but she wasn't it. 1995, they broke up. Just as she found her voice, she left, and he went further on his spiritual path. In 2007, things in India got tougher. Shilpa Shetty was kissed by Gere on stage at an event to raise awareness about HIV. People didn't think it was safe to try to show love, but it was. He got in trouble with the law, there were protests, and effigies were set on fire. Shetty was even scolded by a judge for not fighting back. It took 15 years of work on the case before she was found not guilty. Gere said sorry right away, but the damage was already done. He got married to Carrie Lowell for the second time. They had a son named Homer together and were together for almost 20 years. But things got bad when they broke up in 2013. They fought over child custody and things worth more than 120 million yen. It was worth $65 million just to buy the Bedford Post House. Lowell got about $33 million in the end. Their different spiritual practices, his Buddhist retreats versus her life in Manhattan, made them drift apart. He had flings that made the news when he wasn't with someone. Some things were said about Barbra Streisand in the early 1980s. He dated Padma Lakshmi in secret in 2014. She had just lost someone close to her. He was going through a split. They tried to keep things fun. It wasn't long. Then he met Alejandra Silva, a Spanish worker who was 33 years younger than him. Alex and James were born when Gere was 70 and 71 years old, after they got married in 2018. Their home in Connecticut was worth $10.75 million, but by late 2024, they had sold it and moved to Spain. It wasn't for fun. It was love. He told her that she had given up a lot to come to the US with him and now it was her turn to give back. They moved to a quiet part of Madrid called La Moraleja. But it wasn't easy to change. Within 6 months, there were talks of going back to the United States. Still, they didn't talk about their family. There are no pictures of the kids, only quiet posts from Alejandra that show parts of their home. Behind the scenes, he set up a trust in 1991 to help Tibetan refugees. Started to suffer. It's not that he became less good at playing, it's that he spoke out against China. Studios were afraid of losing access to Chinese markets, so they put him on a secret ban. All of this was said in a Senate meeting in 2024. Someone in China told him, crying, that talking to him would ruin his future. Gere's foundation lost money. He stopped getting movie parts, but he kept working while he was in Nepal in 2017 visiting refugee camps. He got sick. A cough turned into asthma that was very bad. Was 68 years old and almost died. The doctors said it was very bad. It was what he called karmic exhaustion. A lot of travel, activity, and stress over the years had caught up with him. He meditated, got better, and learned to slow down for months. By 2025, everything had come full circle. He won the International Goya Award from Spain. It's been 50 years since his first movie. He did not talk about fame or money during his speech. Instead, he talked about native people, Tibet, and children who were taken from their homes. He said that more than 1 million Tibetan children were being sent to Chinese schools against their will. His job wasn't to promote a movie. He used the stage to fight for opinions that no one hears. Then there was O Canada, a movie about the truth, getting old, and dying. He did it to say goodbye to the Hollywood version of himself. By the time he was 76, he didn't care about red carpets or business. He cared about important stories. A lot of times, he said that home-cooked meals and time with his kids were more important to him than power lunches in LA. You can still see him act, but now it's his choice.